Muslim Brotherhood's offer to take part in negotiations with the government is a major about-face for the powerful organisation. Analysts say it's a strategic move aimed at ensuring it gets a seat at the table before it's too late. SBS chief correspondent Brian Thomson is in Cairo.
Well, that change of heart by the Muslim Brotherhood has not gone down well among the protesters who've led the demonstrations here over the past 2 weeks. Their central demand is, and always has been, that there should be no talks until President Mubarak steps down. The head of the Egyptian army's central command wades into an angry throng. The army wants to get this shattered city back on its feet. But after 12 days, protesters massing in and around Tahrir Square are having none of it. When the army tried to remove the barricades, the crowds blocked their tanks. There is a sense among the protesters that things are moving their way, an announcement on state TV contributing to their growing optimism.
مشاهدينا، وقد جاءنا في نبأ عاجل الآن أن أعضاء هيئة مكتب الحزب الوطني الديمقراطي قد قدموا استقالاتهم اليوم.
Gone is the president's son and one-time heir apparent Gamal Mubarak, an unpopular man who until all this started looked destined for the presidency. His replacement, Hossam Badrawi, is a relative moderate, but he nonetheless believes that Hosni Mubarak should remain in power to lead a transition. It's a contentious idea, one generating mixed messages from Washington. America's special envoy to Egypt said President Mubarak needs to remain in power for the immediate future.
The president must stay in office in order to steer those changes through. I therefore believe that President Mubarak's continued leadership is critical.
The White House signalled he'd spoken out of turn and was expressing his personal point of view. But in Cairo's affluent Hon Zamalek district, the idea resonates with some Egyptians, worried their country could be blowing its chance at building a stable democracy.
We want a proper handover. We want a new government to take over after September. We want a proper elections. But for that to happen, he has to stay for the coming 6 months. Things have to stabilize here first before we get to choose another one to represent us.
The thousands in the square say they will stay until the president goes.
This is a revolution. This is not just a reform movement. This is a revolution. We need complete change, and he has to go.
They say they have sacrificed too much to give up now.
Well, I got about 7 stitches, I don't remember exactly. It's all over here.
As they lick their wounds, the government is trying to return the city to some semblance of normality. It's hoping to reopen the banks today and the roads around Tahrir Square. The protesters feared that may allow the pro-government thugs who caused such havoc last week to once again get too close for comfort. The protest leaders here are closely monitoring the views of the international community. International support is crucial for their cause, and they are becoming concerned at what they perceive to be a shift towards President Mubarak leading the transition.
Each year, Munich plays host to world leaders for a summit on global security issues. And this year, Egypt and the fears of wider instability were taking centre stage. The US said the unrest was a warning to the whole region, and leaders could not hold back the tide for long.
That has been the story of the last weeks. It is what has driven demonstrators into the streets of Tunis, Cairo, and cities throughout the area. The status quo is simply not sustainable.
But there were signs of a subtle shift in Washington's call for Mr. Mubarak to step down straight away, as well as Mr. Obama's envoy saying Mr. Mubarak still had a crucial role to play. Clinton stressed any transition must be orderly.
And it is our hope that this proceeds peacefully, that it proceeds with specific goals being achieved so that people can see that their voices have been heard.
Any change in emphasis to a gradual transition will be seen as a major rebuff by the protesters. And the EU's foreign policy chief said it was important that people saw signs of reform underway.
We've continued to make absolutely clear that we want to see the transition begin and a real process that gives confidence. We always come back to the same word. It's confidence for the people of Egypt that things are moving.
And Mr Mubarak received support from an unlikely quarter. Israel's president saying his contribution to peace would never be forgotten.
In spite of all the attacks against President Mubarak, I know him for many years throughout his presidency, and I credit him with one of the persons who saved many lives by preventing war in the Middle East. He saved the life of Egyptians, of Arabs, of Israelis, by not allowing to renew a war.
Echoing Mr Mubarak himself, he warned that his ouster could open the door to even greater instability. Nick Wells, World News Australia.
Well, another 2 international journalists were arrested here yesterday in what is a continuing campaign against the media. The government officially denies that journalists are being targeted. But if it truly believes that, then it shows just how out of touch it is. We had to move from our hotel in Tahrir Square 2 days ago because of threats to our safety. Most of the Australian broadcast media is now at this hotel, 15 minutes away from Tahrir Square. Between here and there is 2 vigilante checkpoints manned by thugs and criminals armed with knives, machetes and guns. Their menacing presence makes it impossible for us to do our job, impossible to leave this hotel. 2 of my colleagues who have tried to leave over the past 2 days have found themselves pulled from their car at knife point, endured a terrifying experience before being handed over to the military. The thuggery is so intense that most of us have decided to leave the country. In a short while, we will leave in a security convoy for the airport. The government may not have had success in silencing the protesters, but slowly and surely it is successfully managing to muzzle the media. Leland?
Thanks, Brian. SBS Chief Correspondent Brian Thomson speaking there from Cairo.